Afrobeat 94. VOAR. The Voice of Africa Radio.
Hello, good morning to you. Good evening and welcome to Voice of Africa Radio and its Insight. Today, the 27th of October 2014. You still tune in to Voice of Africa Radio, and I have in the studio Elizabeth Jones in the house, UKIP. She is well today to come and join in the discussion. I know Mr. Farage is now in the pub with his friends laughing at Cameron. That we told you so. You will soon join us. I have Dwayne Thomas in the house from SPGB. He's here tonight to discuss these important issues with us. Mahmoud Faiz. What are you going to tell Elizabeth? We need 1.7 billion of Britain to support the EU budget, plus 55 million every day and other monies to commitment attached to the European Union. And British Parliament have voted in favor of two-state Palestinian statehood. We will be discussing this in detail on Voice of Africa Radio on the program Insight. Is 7 minutes after 7 o'clock. Do stay tuned and don't go away.
We get your views on issues, we play you the best music. This is VOAR, the Voice of Africa Radio 94 FM, the station designed to bring the best of Africa to London.
Good evening and welcome to Voice of Africa Radio, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm not going to be blamed because now I host every morning. I say good morning. So coming to the evening, the transition is now becoming something that I need to have a clear distinction between the times. But never mind. MPs, including Labour leader Ed Miliband, have voted to recognize Palestinian as a state in a symbolic move that will unnerve Israel by suggesting that it is losing a wider battle for public opinion in Britain. Now, Elizabeth.
Yes, Adam.
British Parliament, Swedish,
Yes.
are saying that Palestinians should be recognized as a state. And a state we know has its army, territorial integrities, and other things that makes it stand on its own independent. Do you think that this symbolic gesture shown by the British Parliament will put pressure on the Israelis to have peace talk or dialogue with the Palestinian in terms of this two-statehood?
Well, let's just make it clear that on the 27th of April of this year, the House of Commons voted to recognise Palestine as a nation. It wasn't to do with the two-state solution. It was just to recognise Palestine as a nation. The Swedish PM, Stefan Löfven, his country's also recognised Palestine as a nation, as indeed has Ireland. Now, this was just a motion. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a green or white paper. There are 650 MPs. Only 274 voted for that. It was put forward by the Labour MP Graham Morris and seconded by Conservative Crispin Blunt, who is a friend of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he was, in fact, hosted by them in Cairo in July 2013. The UKIP policy for Palestine is to have the two-state solution with the 1967 border following the UN Security Council Resolution 242 of Lord Caradon. UKIP supports a peaceful resolution. Clearly, we support UK security and wealth, and we take the view that if Palestine can achieve a stable democracy, this will be better for the wealth of the world.
Dwayne, Palestinian, the host is becoming a guest now. The right to live in Palestine is luxury. To have a roof over your head under the Israeli occupation. Now that countries are recognizing Palestine to be a state, what is your take on that?
Well, the problem in the Middle East is a historic one. It goes a long way back. The current situation is the current situation is a state in embryo is likely to emerge, but we really don't know how successful a state it will be because the Palestinians themselves aren't united. There are many factions. There's Fatah, there's Hamas, and there's a whole alphabet soup of political organizations all contesting for control of the state when it emerges.
But isn't that a democratic process?
Certainly, there is an element of political democracy if the working class in Palestine, Palestinians in the Middle East, are allowed to return should they wish. There's certainly the right to vote is an important right which shouldn't be shunned, but democracy in itself is not a solution. Democracy is only useful if you use it to further your class interests. The Israelis, of course, have a trump card in their pocket, and that's the support of the United States.
Well, Mahmoud, now that countries like Britain, we know the conservative are friends of Israel. Most of the people in this institution support the existence of the Zionist state. Therefore, now that majority of these countries are saying that we should have a Palestine as a state, isn't it time for Israel to realize that they are losing the battle of taking land from the Palestinians? Therefore, they have to, and it should be recognized. Palestinians should be recognized as a state.
Well, I mean, let's just go. I mean, a lot of times I meet people on the street and say, well, what have you Lib Dems done or anything? Well, look at it this way. We've actually got Tories, the architects of the Balfour Agreement, of the Zionist movement, the architects and supporters of it, now voted in the House of Commons that recognize the people of Palestine. Yeah, the state of Palestine. Yeah, so that's a good way forward. That's a one step forward. But as for Israel, well, Israel really needs to start listening to the world community, because every day as it passes, and it commits draconian human rights violations, the world is starting to turn away from Israel, and they start to say, look, enough is enough. You have to recognize and abide by international law just like every other country does, and abide by law. Let's put it in perspective. The people of Palestine and Gaza cannot even control their own water. Even the tap water is control of how much water they can actually drink. That cannot be right. That cannot be basic. That's a basic human right that's been taken from the people of Palestine. We in Britain should work collectively together to make sure we have good human rights, not only in Palestine, but many other regions, such as Kashmir, Khalistan, and many others, or even the Kurdish people.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
why do you think that Israel is now losing the battle of holding up or not giving up the right for Palestinians to live, annexation of the West Bank, further annexation of it, and other atrocities taking place in the Palestine?
Well, we've got a difficult situation because we don't really have a clear idea of what's going on there, as we don't with the situation in Iraq. I mean, Naftali Bennett, he is the economy minister, and he's proposed that areas of the West Bank should have granted limited autonomy for the Palestinians. So that has been mooted and discussed. There's also a very, very difficult balance because Palestine itself, or the Palestinians, they're heavily reliant on aid income. I'll just go through the countries where the bulk of their income comes from. Number one, UN refugee donor money, Saudi Arabia, USA.
But we know the Palestinian is the biggest prison on earth now, because they don't have any. Well,
let's just break it down. Okay, so we've got a situation whereby we've got Ireland, Sweden, UK are having a notional vote to say that they recognise the nationhood of Palestine. However, Palestine relies heavily on a donor income, aid, as a refugee status from, as I say, the UN, Saudi, USA, Egypt, UK, EU, UAE, Kuwait, Israel, and in fact, I understand that every Palestinian gets $250 a month, free accommodation, free medicine. This is more than a qualified doctor in Egypt. There are many areas of Egypt.
Free accommodation from who?
Well, they're just, well, I don't know from who, but they have free accommodation, free medicine in their area.
We can see that they are struggling
Gaza.
to have medicines. They are struggling to have hospitals under the Palestinians' control. They are struggling to have clean water, electricity, and even food. How can they have free accommodation? And
well, these are the stats. They get $250 a month, and they are wealthier in many areas than people in Egypt.
Reflection of what is happening in Palestine?
Absolutely not. I'll tell you what the true reflection is, that the Palestinian nation was so sufficient, never needed any aid whatsoever until it was invaded by Israel and taken. Then what happens is, as even if farmers go out to farm their fields, they're shot at by Israeli soldiers. Even children are shot at. Their water's cut off, they cannot plough their field. The Israelis have by law the right to go into any farmland that Palestinians have, confiscated for military purpose, and then 99.9%, you know, that ends up in the hands of the occupiers, farmers. And one very primitive, you remember Jaffa oranges, how nice and sweet they were, how good they were. But that was Palestinians used to do that, and they were literally overnight kicked out of their homeland. The second about the house, about the free accommodation, well, I don't know how you define it, free accommodation, because if someone came and bombed my house and I had to live in a Red Cross tent, I doubt if somebody could charge me rent for that, really. It'd be very difficult. I mean, very heartless. And knowing that the people were self-sufficient, is it not better for the world economy that they are made independent and become self-sufficient again and do not rely on aid?
Well, Dwayne, if Palestinian today is recognized as a state, do you think that they will still be getting the aid and assistance from these organizations, the UN and the countries that are supporting them as refugees?
Well, we haven't seen, or I personally haven't seen any detailed plans as to what will happen during the crossover from pre-state to a fully fledged state with its own armed forces and lawmaking and enforcement and so on, and control over its own economy. I haven't seen any worked out details. What I have seen is a draft constitution for the Palestinian state, and Article 16 of it says, the economic system in Palestine shall be based on the principles of a free economy. Now, a free economy is rather a weasel phrase. Free for what? Free to be exploited. Free for the owning class that will rule in Palestine to exploit the working class.
Wouldn't that be better off than now that they are under occupation? You cannot fish beyond certain mile on your own territorial waters. You don't have access to your water, electricity. You don't have a lot of things that are in this country that cannot be done by the Palestinians. So under a statehood, don't you think those things can be done collectively with the invitation of the private sector to change the economy of the Palestinian?
Well, the situation will be in the Palestinian state that there will still be two classes. There'll be an owning class, a wealthy, privileged minority, and there'll be the rest, the working class, who have, in order to live, to sell their ability to work.
But they will still have their lives, and they will have their right recognized by the state, whereby they will not live under any refugee camp and would not be subjected to stoning and tear gas every day.
Well, you know, the record is that the elite that currently run things in Palestine aren't averse to using a bit of the old violence and tend to murder one another, and people fall out of windows and this kind of stuff. It's a very dangerous thing to be in opposition to the ruling elite in Palestine today, and I can't see it being very much different if a Palestine state is set up tomorrow.
Elizabeth, the
Yes.
falling of the South African apartheid started just the same way as events unfolding today. Can we put time on when Palestinians will be free from Israeli occupation?
Well, I don't think we can, but we can hope that they will become economically viable and that they'll become an integrated economic unit. We've got a situation where, of course, you've got the Gaza Strip is under Hamas control, you've got West Bank under Fatah control. I understand they've got two different legal systems, which doesn't help, you can appreciate that. Furthermore, Hamas is a highly controversial organisation. During the first Intifada, women were required to wear the hijab, women were told to stay indoors, polygamy was encouraged, there was sexual segregation. In 2007, there was a crackdown on card playing, dating was banned, modest dress was enforced, and in fact, as late as 2013, the UN Refugee Welfare Organisation was going to organise a marathon in Gaza for everyone, all the community to enjoy, but Hamas stepped in and banned any woman running in that marathon. So the UN pulled out and said, well, if you're not going to accept sexual equality, we're not going to sponsor that marathon. In 2005, Hamas banned music. In the early 1990s, they were burning bookstores. So, it's a very, very controversial situation. Furthermore, Hamas and Islamic State don't get on. Islamic State has served a fatwa on Hamas, and Egypt has outlawed Hamas.
How should we draw Hamas and Islamic State into this scenario? Independent of the Palestinian state, which we all do not recognize Hamas as a democratic or a civilized institution. Therefore, we don't need to bring in Islamic State into this equation, do we?
Well, do we or don't we? It's clearly rival factions.
But Islamic State is not operating in
No, it's
Palestine,
not.
yeah.
But clearly Hamas has hit its radar, and Caliph Baghdadi has served, I think it was in July of this year, a fatwa on Hamas. I mean, Gaza's got a population of 1.7 million. The Palestinians themselves are highly educated, they're entrepreneurial, young, multilingual. They should be making great economic success of their country. And if all the energy that Hamas poured into conflict was actually poured into the education of their youth, it'd probably be a leading nation.
While you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio, and it's 22 minutes after 7 o'clock on Inside, the socio-political program that tells you more. Now, we are moving towards our second and the most controversial subject. EU has asked Great Britain to contribute more, 1.7 billion towards the EU budget, Britain and Netherlands, whereas Germany and France has been given some rebate. On this subject, Mahmoud, you are pro-European Union. The EU is asking us to give them 1.7 billion to support the budget because our economy is doing well. Fantastic. Why should we pay for somebody to enjoy and not working hard?
Right. I can't get into whether someone enjoys not working hard or anything. I think that's whole lot. But what you've got to understand is, first of all, let's look at it this way. Again, it's a positive step. Let's not look at it as a negative. If this economy is doing well, people have more jobs, more money, and obviously we could do better, right? It means our economy is doing well. It means the Liberal Democrats' policy that what we said is working and moving forward. It's moving and it's been recognized in Europe. That's rather like if you go to work.
They are doing well, but cut the austerity. The cut is still going on.
Allow me to finish, please. If you're doing well, and you earn more wages, you pay more income tax to this government here. Well, this is rather like a bigger government on top to develop the infrastructure of not only Britain, but where and who Britain trades with. Even the computers you see here have been standardized in Europe to make sure they're safe for our working environment and for our property. All these things are unseen things, but they're very important things. And what it is, it's just our income's higher, so we're paying a little bit more. Then we're going to think, well, what's the alternative? UKIP many powers ever say, well, we can simply leave it. Yeah, not a problem, we can deal with it without that. There is a country that does that, Sweden. In order for it to negotiate all of its deals, it still pays 80% of its dividends, and you took someone who has been there and still has no political say.
Well, Dwayne, Britain is to contribute 1.7 to the EU budget. As a socialist, what do you think of this? Do you think Britain should dole out the money to the European Union, or we should keep this money and create jobs within Britain?
Well, I have difficulty dealing with this question when the question is framed using the words we. I don't recognise Britain, the we that you refer to in Britain. I see Britain divided, as I said before, into two competing classes, and the interests of one class will always dominate
Supersede
the interests
the
of the second. We've got to look at why the European Union was set up originally. If you go back to 1945, there was pressure by the Americans on Britain to ally itself in some kind of European Union, some kind of trading union. Britain refused and didn't actually join the common market until 1957. But the European Union was originally set up to deal with what was called the German question. Twice in 50 years, Germany had led Europe into war. Germany was a relative newcomer on the world economy, but it was extremely successful. It was building a powerful economy, and on top of that, it is building a large army and a navy that was large enough to threaten Britain. So the Americans said to the British, look, you need to, they said to the whole of Europe, in fact, you need to sort out this difference you've got with Germany as a condition of receiving Marshall aid to reconstruct Europe after the Second World War. Now, part of the arrangement was that there was a common European kitty, and each member state contributed funds to that kitty. And what we have here is a case of swings and roundabouts. A little while ago, Margaret Thatcher managed to get a refund of British contributions, and now we've been told that the British government is going to have to cough up this rather large and eye-watering sum of money, virtually out of the blue. But as far as I understand, it is part of the rules of the game that Britain signed up to.
So do you think that Britain should give out the money, that 1.7, which the European Union is saying they should pay, Britain should pay by 1st of December?
It's not up to me. I don't have a view on it. The problem is one of who controls the purse strings. And as a member of the working class, I don't control the purse strings.
Well, Elizabeth,
Yes.
this is what the UKIP has been saying, that you want Britain out of the EU.
Yes, now you can see why.
In December, in 2012, when the world economy was in free fall, European Union gave Britain a rebate of 3 billion. This is the time that you need to contribute something to the European Union. Why do you want us to get out of Europe in the first place?
Because
why don't you want us to give them the 1.7 billion when we were in need? We were giving 3 billion rebate.
the whole EU is a complete scam. We're being requested to pay 1.7 billion by the 1st of December. I don't think we've had much notice of that. And who's getting the money? France is going to get a rebate of 1 billion. Germany's going to get a rebate of 779 million. 8 other countries have been requested to pay up: Ireland, Italy, Greece, amongst some, and of course the Netherlands. Matteo Renzi has said this isn't a figure but a lethal weapon. It's a complete con. What's happened is that there's been a change with our accountancy rules. The Office for National Statistics has now made itself in line with Eurostat in 2013 and has, lo and behold, added an extra 74 billion to our GNI. Now, this new accounting method actually includes our grey economy. So they have come up with some cuckoo pigs might fly figure for drug dealing in the United Kingdom, prostitution income in the United Kingdom. Furthermore, also added is research and development and weapons spend. So these, I would say, are fictional. They're not necessarily any indication that our economy is fantastically healthy, but it is, as always, the EU's dislike of the Anglosphere. This EU, it does not benefit us. Since 1979, we've paid in, £228 billion. We've had £143 billion back. In fact, we've given an £85 billion subsidy to the EU dream of France and Germany's marriage. It's a nonsense. It's a Ponzi scheme. We don't need it. It does not benefit the public at all.
Mahmoud, do you think the EU doesn't benefit the British public?
Well, of course it benefits. We've had 2 world wars, millions of people die, and the reason behind that was that Germany felt there was unfair trading terms and it could not trade with the world because most of the globe was covered either by France or by Britain. And this led to the First World War. Then that eventually led to the Second World War. As a liberal, I believe that young children, our young youth, should be living for this country, not dying for this country. The EEC has made an even playing field with sets of rules for everyone to follow. And going back again, what you said about Britain getting £3 billion, that's right. Say, for example, I lost my job tomorrow and the government would give me a handout to help me out. When I find my job, I get a job, I would pay taxes. And if I got paid a bit more, I would pay a bit more taxes.
Dwayne, when the times are hard, we had rebate from the European Union. What makes it wrong for us to also contribute to the European budget? Because in 2012, we had 3.2 billion to support our economy, rebate to grow our economy. Now that the government is jumping hallelujah, our economy is doing better, our economy is doing well. With all indications, Britain is becoming the capital of employment for Europe. So isn't this justifiable by convention, the European Convention, that per the performance of your economy, you have to contribute more to the European budget? Isn't it right for Britain to pay this amount of money?
Well, again, you're using Britain and we as if the two things...
Yeah, we are in Britain.
Yes, we are in Britain.
Yes.
But we are not Britain. Britain doesn't belong to us. It belongs to a favoured minority.
Who are the favoured minority?
Owners.
Who are the favoured minority?
Who are the favoured minority? Well,
Yeah.
I refer to several reports. For example, the Sunday Times Rich List, which is published, I think, once a year. They publish the top 50 wealth owners in Britain. They are the capitalist class. They own virtually everything in Britain.
So the capitalist Britain should pay this amount of money.
It's not for me to say. That is a problem I leave to the capitalist class. I have difficulty paying my mortgage and meeting my bills. These large sums of money don't come our way. I've never seen any of this money. It goes into the general taxation fund, which is taxation is levied, and it's a burden which falls on the property class.
Therefore, you don't think that Britain should pay this money to the European? They shouldn't contribute to the European economy.
I'm not interested in Britain. I'm interested in a world society where nations don't exist. There are no states, there are no nations, there are only people and administrative areas.
All right, so the people within this geographical boundary,
Yes.
do you accept that our contribution towards building this geographical boundary, the boundary that we find ourselves in, you and I,
Yes.
should contribute such an amount to the bigger geographical boundary that we are located within?
No, I'm sorry, I don't accept your question. I don't accept the framework in which you put your question and see the problem. You see, my problem is getting enough in order to live from day to day. That's my main problem. Questions of investment, where society goes in the future, I want to see a change in world society where these things don't matter anymore.
How can the working class get a job to do if we don't have people to invest within
Well, yes, that's
jobs?
it. Precisely, that is one of our problems. And to go back to our earlier topic, workers in Palestine will still be workers seeking employment from an employer, and if they can't find an employer, doesn't matter whether they're able to work or not. If they're able to work and the work needs to be done and the materials are there or can be made available, that is the question that we should be addressing ourselves to, not whether what our rulers think is best for them.
Well, Elizabeth,
Yes.
let's consider the statement made by our glorious Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron, saying that if people of Britain think that he's going to pay this money, then they have to have a second thought, because he's not going to pay this money. Isn't it a pressure exerted upon him by UKIP and the Eurosceptic tendencies of your party that is driving this Prime Minister to object a legitimate demand by the European Union for Britain to contribute its part to the European budget?
Well, we don't necessarily think it is legitimate. It's a retrospective tax going back to 2002. Why should we be subject to a retrospective tax? We say it's as a result of a change in the accounting process that they're using. Again, why have they suddenly decided to change the accounting process? So we don't accept that. And, well, if it's pressure from UKIP, all well and good. Of course, he will pay. He's lying, and he's going to pay every single penny. He's just worried about his job on the 7th of May 2015. And I think he thinks if he makes a big enough noise now, no one's going to watch him sneak out and pay it all.
Well, Mahmoud, we are paying the bill, and we have to pay. What will be the consequences of Britain not honoring this payment?
Well, I mean, you get into regulations and laws and what would happen in tit for tat and things like that. But I mean, we don't want to get into the situation. Clearly, it's been defined that we benefit from it. When we benefit from something, we need to pay something back. It's called collective responsibility. We pay tax in this country to invest in our police force, our army, our NHS, all of this. And the EU is something like that, but in a bigger scale.
Well, listeners, it's time approximately 40 minutes after 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio. You still tune into your favorite radio. Also on the internet on www.voar94.com and on your tuning radio at Afrobeat Radio. Do stay tuned and don't go away. We'll join you pretty soon after this commercial break.
Afrobeat 94. VOAR, the voice of Africa Radio.
From the people that know, for the people that matter. VOAR.
Yes, welcome back from the break on Voice of Africa Radio, as we're discussing this important issue tonight as to whether Britain should pay the money to European to contribute their quota to the European economy. Elizabeth,
Yes.
Germany, France, these two countries have been holding the fort for the EU for quite so long, especially when Portugal was in crisis. Angela Merkel did a whole lot of things to hold the European Union together. Germany has been contributing a lot more. French also has been contributing a lot more. So these two countries getting rebate is the problem for you or the people of Britain not to accept that we have also taken some rebate, and it's time for us to also contribute our quota to the European budget.
My problem isn't with how much Germany pays to the EU. Germany can pay as much as she likes, similarly with France. We are the second biggest net contributor to the EU. It's Germany, then us, then France. We pay out a hell of a lot more than we get out of it. And we also lost our rebate. In 1984, Margaret Thatcher got us a rebate because many of the countries were relying on the cap. We weren't. Our economy wasn't that agricultural, so we had a significant rebate. We weren't getting much out of that. Tony Blair, under Labour, managed to reduce that significantly, and it's estimated by 2020 the UK rebate will be gone in entirety. So we are subbing these other countries unnecessarily. In 2017 we've got Moldova entering, we've got Ukraine at the fringes hoping to enter as well. It's not our job to subsidise these poor countries. We have to look after our own here. It's simply not acceptable.
Aren't we creating a bigger market for the British commodities and services to be sold out there for the interest of our country?
Well, for the interest of our country, the Office for National Statistics 2013, the first 3 months of 2013, 51% of our exports went to countries outside the EU. And please note, we don't trade with the EU as a trading bloc. We're trading with the individual countries. And if we do leave, then we can always trade with those countries. They're not going to cease trading with us.
But you'll be paying a lot more money in taxation.
Not necessarily, no. I think it's reached a stage now where it's more or less a zero-sum game. So I don't think they'll be allowed to They won't be allowed to inflict heavy tariffs on us. The World Trade Organization will prevent that. So I can't see any justification for our ongoing membership at all. And let us not forget, all right, we're expected to pay 1.7 billion, like that, had a couple of weeks' notice, pay up 1st of December. Let us not forget, I've got to go back to this, Calabria. The Calabrian Development Fund had I think it had about 10 billion euros from the EU. The vast majority of that went on fraud, fake roads, fake wind farms, fake drug ports, all of this up in smoke. Did the Calabrians have to pay it back? No, they don't pay it back. What they have to do is show to the EU that they have now put an equivalent amount of money into clean projects. So it appears to me that the EU would be so desperate to keep people within the fold that even if we said we're not paying,
isn't that
they do very
incumbent
little.
upon your MEPs in Brussels to ask for Calabria the UKIP? You've got MEPs, don't you?
We have MEPs, but
so why don't you put a petition in to ask for accountability for what you think is a money waste on project in Europe?
It's been done. It's already been done. It's already been processed, and that's the end result. Basically, if you can show you're going to spend an equivalent amount of money in a clean project, whatever a clean Calabrian project is, then that's okay. There is no comeback. Now, we've got very little influence in the EU. Each time a new nation joins...
You can form an alliance. You can join other Eurosceptic parties too.
Even if we do form alliances with Eurosceptics, our country alone, we have very little influence in the EU. This idea that we've got influence and being in the EU give us influence is not the case at all. And with regard to peacekeeping, the reason why we've had peace in Europe is because NATO was set up in 1949, and that is the muscle that prevents any military outbreak. It's NATO.
Well, Mahmoud, from what Elizabeth is saying, UKIP believe that Britain is not getting anything at all from the European Union. And you are pro-Europe. You think Europe is doing fantastic. And that Britain being part of the European Union will do fantastic.
Well, I think we're going the right direction. Let's make sure the ship goes in the right direction. Let's not make sure the ship hits an iceberg, as what UKIP want to do. Let me just touch on a few things. For example, she mentioned the World Trade Organization. Well, the World Trade Organization was there before 1945. So why did they stop the peace then? What happened then? And then she said we can individually trade.
Why
with
did they
countries.
stop what? Peace?
Please, yeah, because
trade,
what
not
was the First and
peace.
Second World War. It's about Germany was not allowed to trade with countries because Britain and France had a block, okay, well, they're occupiers of parts of Asia and Africa, which are very rich in resources. Then what Elizabeth says is that we can trade individually with those countries. To make those rules would take 15 years. Because there's a lot of rules and a lot of work had to be done. So to do that...
15 years to do what?
To look at all those rules and all those regulations. You can't just come tomorrow and say, 20 hours we'll do this, and then you go Italy, you go most Europe. It doesn't happen as well. I mean, there's not a magic wand you got bang what UKIP would like you to believe. It's a very complicated issue. Negotiate. Look at it this way. You go to buy a house or you go to buy anything, you negotiate, yeah? But imagine doing that at a country level, risking, in fact, your education.
But your Prime Minister,
the
Great Britain Prime Minister is saying that he's going to have some form of negotiations with the European Union, first on the taxation, on the immigration, and on this. So why then did the Prime Minister say there's going to be a negotiations?
With Europe.
Yes, with
not
Europe.
With each individual country, what UKIP is saying. That would take 15 years. And the other thing you said, before we said that voting UKIP would be a waste of time. They have the MEPs don't get hardly vote, they got no power, and Elizabeth has just admitted they have no influence. Why did they take their wages? Why did they stand in elections? Why did they have a bother? And more important, the people who vote, why do you have a bother about? You've heard it from the horse's mouth. They have no influence, they make no difference. The only one that makes difference, and they did make a coalition, yeah, and it collapsed. Because that's what happens to people who want to put borders around everybody. They
Elizabeth
can't get along with anybody.
He's saying that voting UKIP MEPs is a waste of time and it's useless because you don't have influence in the Brussels.
But we have influence in the UK. We are the political energy and driving force of this country. Certainly not the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems are dead.
Well, you still tune into...
So 70% of the policies
Voice of Africa Radio.
I shall send you a wreath.
Voice of Africa Radio 94 FM. I am in the studio with Elizabeth Jones, UKIP Chairwoman Sadok, and prospective parliamentary candidate for Dartford. And I have Dwayne Thomas, great Socialist Party of Great Britain. He's also in the studios with me, who does not recognize artificial boundary creating states, but he wants to see the entire world with a working class people who would have one common interest. And I believe they don't believe the Socialist parties don't believe in wages. They believe working for what you can get. Dwayne, am I right?
Yes.
No money.
Well, I believe in abolishing the wage system and contributing what I can and taking from the common pool of what's produced the things I need in order to live.
Well, I have Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrat and also a human rights activist, and yet to see if he will be selected for his constituency to contest for parliamentary seat. And I hope to see these two people in parliament, Elizabeth and Mahmoud Faiz. That would be a very wonderful parliament that we'll ever see. Dwayne, now these two parties are saying that Britain in the European Union, Britain out of European Union. You don't believe in all these artificial boundaries, but you believe in the working class people, that everyone will be the same, will work and contribute and get what we contribute, benefit from what we put into the kitty, our contribution.
Yes,
your analogy, isn't it applicable to what now European Union is saying, that being a member of the working class as Britain, you have to put in some investment into the entire kitty, so that when it's well, you can earn something for the people of your country.
But the point is, the working class don't have funds to invest in this kind of thing.
They take, we contribute our taxes, taxation.
That's what makes them members of the working class. They cannot rely on unearned income to live. In order to live, the working class has to sell its abilities to work for a wage or a salary. The Socialist Party is part of a world movement that wants to abolish the working class. In socialism,
And have
there'll
what?
be common ownership and production directly for use. The things we need in order to live will be produced by the cooperative efforts of everyone.
So you don't support either Great Britain or European Union when it comes to how to have the bigger budget by the Union. You don't have any of them.
No, I don't. The Socialist Party play no part in these games between various sections.
So what is
of
the
only
alternative view of the Socialist Party to have the economy running?
class. Sorry, the positive.
Your alternative view to have the European economy running, various states without European Union.
Look, capitalism is a world system and must be abolished worldwide. You cannot have little pockets of socialism existing in one country or one area. The working class need to organise themselves politically and consciously and gain political control of the machinery of government, and then they can say, when they've all or the majority have agreed that that's what needs to be done, we can abolish capitalism.
Assuming today the working class has got the machinery of government of Great Britain, would you like Great Britain to be part of the European Union or out of the European Union?
No, I'm sorry, the working class don't. Working
Now,
class.
assuming you've got your hands.
Assuming.
Yes.
Yes, well, assuming if a majority of the working class believes and agrees with what I'm proposing, then
let's imagine that they believe and have much confidence in what you are proposing.
Yes.
And today Britain is under the working class. Would you want Britain to be part of the European Union or outside the European Union?
No, these things won't exist. Once we've done away with capitalism and instituted a new form of society, from each according to their ability to each according to their need, and we've abolished class ownership of the means of life, we have common ownership of the world, we can run things for the benefit of everyone, not for the benefit of a privileged minority. There won't be things like the European Union. There won't be buying and selling. There'll be production for use.
Well, this is very interesting. Elizabeth,
Yes.
Now you are determining the pace of political discourse in this country today.
Yes.
Because Liberal Democrats and Conservative are now one way or the other. They are in coalition, so the onus lie on them to pay this money, to cough up this money. But the Prime Minister is saying they are not going to pay this money. And I think that is the stand of UKIP.
Oh, yes.
So what will be the consequences again for Britain not to honor this obligation?
Well, it'd be brinkmanship, wouldn't it? It's going to be the person with the strongest backbone. I wonder whether there'd be any implication whatsoever, because I would say Germany and France would be so committed to UK remaining in the EU. What are they going to do? Furthermore, we had President Rajoy of Spain. He was rather cheeky with Angela Merkel when she was asking him about was he going to comply with payment of the bailout conditions. And I understand his response was no. And what happened? Is Spain still in the EU? Is Spain still receiving bailouts? I understand it is the case. What happened with Calabria taking the 10 billion euros and spending it the way it wanted?
Elizabeth,
has that been paid back?
can Britain
No.
compete with China and America when Britain is alone in the international market and any negotiations whatsoever?
It's not a question of competing. We would want to enter into joint trade agreements that would be beneficial to both countries.
Can Britain do that?
Well, Britain was doing it quite successfully up till 1973. I don't know what happened after 1973. Seems we've entered into sort of a collective amnesia where our past abilities to do world trade seem to be completely forgotten. Now, I explained to you earlier about the Office for National Statistics. We're already moving away bit by bit from trading with the EU as our main partner. And Japan, Norway, Switzerland all do very well outside the EU. So can we.
Mahmoud, Great Britain, can it compete with the might of China, America, when it comes to trading with some blocks?
It's got a great history of engineering. Of course, Great Britain can complete with the world.
So why don't you want us to get out of Europe?
Allow me to finish. But being in Europe means that we can share our technologies. For example, let me give you an example. Yeah, I'm not going to bother with the Office for National Statistics because that's for pen pushers. That's not people that can affect my life every day. Say, for example, the Nissan Leaf car, which is an all-electric car. Walk outside, see how many you can see driving? Hardly any. So where do they all go? They all go across Europe. Because a free border, we can trade, no, because equally, our skills we can export as well. There's a lot of benefit to have to not working against one another, but working collectively, together, and for one another.
Well, you so tuned into Voice of Africa Radio, and it's 56 minutes after 7 o'clock. After 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio, and we will be taking our final bits of this program today as to these important two subjects. Can Britain refuse to pay this money and the consequences of it? Elizabeth, be snappy with this. What do you think the next step will be if we decide not to pay this money and follow UKIP?
There will be no next step because David Cameron simply doesn't have the strength of character to do that. On the 2nd of December, he'll pay up every single penny. That will be very quiet news. Perhaps we'll get a big splashy news story in the 2nd of December to try and divert the media's attention away from that. But I guarantee he will pay. Now, if we just return back to Palestine, or the Palestinians, in 2008, our export markets had increased by 30%. We could be trading with the Palestine nation, as UKIP supports the two-nation state, so let's plough our energies into that. Message to the Palestinian people, would you please be kind enough to amend Article 341 of your penal code, whereby you state that honour killings are extenuating circumstances for killing women. The Times of India, 11th of July 2010, stated that in the Palestinian territories there are about 34 women per calendar month being subject to honour killings. If you want to move forward to the future and be embraced by the world, give up honour killings.
Dwayne Thomas, Socialist Party of Great Britain, your final thoughts on these two subjects?
Well, there are problems that are thrown up by the society. We live in a society based on class ownership and class conflict. These kinds of problems will continue to arise because it's the way capitalism works.
Well, Mahmoud, we are subjected to paying this huge sum of money to the European budget so that we can also contribute what we have. We can also benefit from what we have contributed. What is your final talk? And Elizabeth is going to send you a writ.
No, that's fine. Right, what I was going to say was, just to go back on what Elizabeth said about the Palestinian and the Times of India. Believe it or not, according to India, is the second most dangerous place for women in the world. So I don't know whether
they rape them on the street.
Positioning us to say that, but just to say like working collectively, together, and working unitedly, what we've achieved. A third of the income of every country is now tax-free. Say thank you to the Liberal Democrats. You work together, work well.
Elizabeth, you say thank you to Liberal Democrats?
Do I say what?
Thank you to Liberal Democrats for giving us
I say thank you for the Liberal Democrats for launching UKIP. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being part of this program starting from 7 till now. I thank you very much. Do listen to us next week on Inside between 7 and 8 on Voice of Africa Radio as we come to you with most exciting and important topics that will make you understand what is going on around the world. Do join me same time next week between the hours of 7 and 8. I thank you, Elizabeth from UKIP, Dwayne from Socialist Party of Great Britain, and Mahmoud from Liberal Democrats. Once again, thank you all for joining me. Well, this is it. Don't do what I wouldn't do. Do join me tomorrow between the hours of
news.